Welcome to the National Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal weekly webcast series. My name is Ashley Cope, and I'm the marketing manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I would like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for the speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question or chat box and we'll bring them up at the end. This session will also be recorded and available on our website. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Victor Rocha, Conference Chairman of the National Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor Rocha. I'm the Conference Chairman for the National Indian Gaming Association. My co-host is Jason Giles. Welcome to the new normal. I apologize. In today's conversation, we're speaking with our good friend, Chairman Rodney Butler from the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation from Connecticut. We're talking to our dear friend, powerful lobbyist, and just a great person, Aureen Martin from Spirit Rock Consulting. And then in a second, our friend Ray Halbritter, representative from the Oneida Nation, will be dropping in. They seem to be a little late. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? That's always great to get everyone at the same time to unmute their button at the same time. It's actually.
I didn't know if that was for. I didn't know if that was for your audience or for us, Victor. But weeky, so good day.
I'm testing everybody, man. You know, every life's a test. You know what I mean? So it seems to be more like a stress test lately, too, though, doesn't it? Yeah, so everyone, welcome, Chairman Butler. You know what? Let's start with you. You know, so the purpose of today's webcast, and we really are appreciative that you're back with us, is you know we're starting to see the pandemic is starting to come out of it. You know, I just had my second vaccine. You know, Aureen was talking; she's getting ready to get hers, and you know, a lot of us are. Jason, I believe, has been vaccinated. You know, so we're starting to come out of this pandemic. But we're starting to see the sports betting thing. You know, we've talked about that all during the pandemic, but we're starting to see more in activity. I was just going through the AGA's sports betting tracker. So currently we have 21 states, including Washington, D.C., that are live with sports betting. We have 4 states that are legal but not operational yet. And then we have 16 states that are active or have pre-filed legislation for 2021. So like Florida, South Dakota just passed a bill. North Dakota just rejected a bill. Minnesota has action. Texas, Missouri, Kansas, Wyoming. So it's, you know, it's really happening. You know, Chairman Butler, what could you explain to us what just happened in Connecticut and where you guys are with sports betting?
Sure. I appreciate that, Victor, and thank you for having me on again. And hello to Jason and my dear friend Aureen as well. Just because you started with the vaccine point, I just want to reiterate that because it's so important, especially in Indian country, for us to understand what that means to us from a community perspective and from an economic perspective, and just how important it is for all of us to go out there and get the vaccines. We have access to it directly through the federal government, through the states, and so. You know, and the impact on our communities is double that of any other community. So it's really important. I've gotten my second shot already, and very little impact other than a sore arm for a day or two. And so I encourage everyone that's watching to, you know, take care of your families, take care of your communities and your economies, and go get vaccinated as well. But you know, to your point about Connecticut, Victor, yeah, you know, this has been a long run. Right. We've been talking sports betting and internet gaming for the better part of 5 years now in Connecticut. And we understand we're in a unique position because there's only 2 tribes in Connecticut in the state. And so it's a 3-way negotiation, which understandably across Indian country, those conversations are much more complex than that. And we also have an exclusivity agreement that goes into perpetuity. And so we were able to leverage that in a way to work with the state. To focus on sports betting, but really come up with, you know, novel legislation that just doesn't focus on sports, but really transitions the entire gaming economy. And in our case, in Connecticut, we're on the cusp, and you mentioned earlier, it passed through our Public Safety Committee, and we'll now move on to the full legislature. But our piece of legislation is sports betting for the tribes in the state. It's internet gaming under the guise of the exclusivity between Pequot and Mohegan, or allowing the lottery to do online ticket sales And as well, Keno will go online as well in the state of Connecticut, which we have a revenue share of. And so, it's really just, it's as we'd like to think of it from a Pequot perspective, it's so advanced and forward thinking, and hopefully a mold that the balance of the country and Indian country in particular can follow.
Are you happy with the deal? I mean, you mentioned revenue sharing with the Keno and stuff like that. That seems very progressive, and I don't think I've seen other deals like that in any of the other states.
Yeah, that's unique. I mean, we allowed the state, again, because of our exclusivity and how tight it is in Connecticut. The state a few years back wanted to get into Keno. Now, the only people offering Keno in the state were both us and Mohegan. And in order for the state to do that without getting sued or putting the slot payments at risk, they agreed to share a portion of the revenue with both tribes. So just like we pay 25% on slots, the state rolling out Keno, we actually received 25% from the state of their Keno revenue. And so now that that's moving online, that will expand that agreement to Keno online as well, which we both, us and Mohegan, will split basically 12.5% each of the Keno revenue across the state.
Are you happy with the tax rates you guys negotiated? I noticed that it was it's like 18%. For 5 years, and then up to 20%. That's
yeah. I think the sign of a good deal, Victor, is that nobody walks away happy, and so there are a lot of there's a lot of components that I'd still love to push back on, and we'd be at the table for 5 more years, right? But end of the day, you have to think about what's best for your nation, and in this case, we have 5,000 employees as well that we're concerned about, and so we want to make sure that whatever impacts us positively impacts them positively. And so, yeah, we could have continued to haggle over the details on this and get a few more points on the tax rate, look for a rev share on sports betting and the like. But all in, it's a good deal, and we're pleased enough with it to come out and support it with Mohegan and with the governor to advance it through the legislative process here in Connecticut. And the legislative session in Connecticut goes until June, and we're optimistic that we'll have this legislation passed within the next month or two, and leading towards the process with Interior and the state putting the regs in place, and we'll be betting on the NFL season this coming fall.
I sure hope Bernhardt signs it. Oh, I forgot he's not in office anymore. I forgot he's not there anymore. And, and it feels like there's this weight off of our chest now that you can actually say, okay, this deal will be vetted on its merits and not on who can get to the Secretary of Interior first. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Certainly, weight has been lifted off of our chest, and I mean, the giant smile I have is obviously for the support that we know that we'll get, the fair shake that we know we'll get from this administration, unlike the prior administration.
Well, and then also, and not to change the subject real quick because I'm not, but the fact that you guys were so proactive in your community and in vaccinations and just getting way ahead of it, and I know there was like thousands and thousands of people vaccinated, so that's really being proactive and taking charge of the health and safety of your community, and I just really want to commend you guys. That I think that was just a really great thing to do. Thanks, Rodney. We support you 100%. It's been a long journey, and I think anyone that's been watching the webcast knows that you guys have been slugging it out for a long time, and so I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I know it wasn't the deal that you wanted. I know the East Windsor Casino is kind of in there and stuff like that, but the world's changed since the pandemic, so congratulations. Can't wait to see this thing finished. Aureen, how are you doing? And I see our friend Ray Halbritter, and good afternoon, sir. You can wave. Aureen, how you doing real quick?
Doing great, thanks. How are you?
I am, I'm really good. As you can see, I'm trapped in the Guitar Center. Hopefully somebody will come in and let me out pretty soon. So, before we get to Ray, can you tell us what again, part of our conversation is the explosion of the sports betting legislation since the pandemic is, actually in the middle of it. It's when it started out in June and July and stuff like that. What can you tell us? What are you hearing?
Well, I think we're still seeing more and more legislation, in states where there are tribes, but I think you're still seeing a slow rollout in states where Indian country is located. And, these are complicated issues. They have to deal with the compact and a lot of times underlying state laws and sometimes the state constitution. So even though there's an appetite out there, and as Chairman Butler said, people are, and you said, people are getting excited and getting ready to go out again. I think it's still taking a little time in some of those states where they have those complicated questions to deal with. The compacts in the state law issues, a lot of times there are, like in some states we're familiar with, there are conflicts with the governors. Even in the best case scenario, it's something that takes a lot of time. But I think there's a lot of optimism. It's just the rollout's taking a little longer because of those complicated legal thorny issues.
I gave the morning alert to this op-ed the other day on Pechanga.net. It was an op-ed from one of the editors from an affiliate website, maybe like casino.org and stuff, like somebody who doesn't even live in Minnesota, probably doesn't even live in the United States, and his whole thing was how the state's missing sports betting and blah, blah, blah. And it was just all it's about him and his company, but it was all wrapped around and concern for the community and stuff like that. So you have a lot of these bottom feeders that really don't care about tribes or what they've been through or the future or the importance of sports betting, you know what I mean? So those kind of things really concern me. You can go to Pechanga.net. It's got a morning alert. I put stupid across his forehead just in case people misinterpreted what I was trying to say. I wanted to make sure that, I was on point. I think it's very important that we have to watch our flanks and we have to watch our back. There's a lot of enthusiasm, but there's a lot of people who really don't care about us or what we've done or where we're going. So I think it's very important that we stay alert. And, if you guys see any more of those, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to burn them on my thing. So Ray, how you doing? Welcome. You have to hit, there you go. You got it, brother. You've been doing this a while.
I've been listening to you. Unfortunately, on my particular computer, they only allowed me audio listening ability, so I had to readjust. So we were with you. I've been with you. So. Okay.
All right. Good. Welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. We're doing really well. Thanks very much. The pandemic hit everybody, so I know we've all been affected, and it's really I think a lot of initiative or if you will, desire by states to expand gaming for revenue's sake is probably even more of interest to them and more, if you call it pressure, for them to find sources of revenue. So I think that's an initiative for many states.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming out of the pandemic, everyone is looking at, and especially with sports betting moving at the speed that it has, like I said, it seems to be moving faster than the pandemic. But for the tribes, and as Chairman Butler said, it's a very important aspect of going forward with our businesses and stuff like that. And speaking of sausage making, there's probably no state that's more interesting when it comes to politics, at least for me, than New York. You guys have done an amazing job over there of holding your own. I've had the privilege of coming to New York a bunch of times, and I've also had the privilege of seeing a lot of what's going down there firsthand. So I really do commend you guys on what you're doing. Can you inform our readers what you guys are doing in New York and how you guys are working out of the pandemic?
Yeah, we of course are like everyone in the same boat. And we are in New York, we're expecting the state legislature to legalize mobile sports betting probably within a week or so. And it'll probably part of the state's budget, which very much increases chances of being enacted. So we foresee that gaming expansion is going to be something that's going to be part of our future. And our hope is to try to be sure we are not left behind in that expansion. There are limited states with both tribal and commercial casinos like us. Connecticut doesn't have commercial casinos. And so we are learning, if you will, from those experiences to some extent. But one of the key questions, and I think what we're hoping to suggest and advance, is an idea that would affect only those states that actually legalize sports gaming, sportsbook gaming. I suspect that it's possible they will probably enlarge that to gaming generally, but right now it's just sports. And so one of the issues that we've identified that we would try to advance is that a technical clarification adjustment to IGRA. Of course, back when IGRA was passed, broadband wasn't as critical to the education economy of everyone as it is today. And we believe and can see that revenue, if you will, is going to be very important to keep up with. We want to be, if you will, in advance of that, not running behind those revenues. So the clarification we're looking to do is to have IGRA define that the actual betting event takes place on Indian land. Currently, it's not clear. And I think there would be a lot of opposition to Native people doing gaming by saying, well, mobile sports betting is occurring off the land, so it would prohibit us from taking advantage of this expansion in gaming. And before we invest millions of dollars into preparing sports gaming, we didn't want to sort of gamble that kind of money at this point. But that clarification, as long as the server is located on tribal lands, we would want IGRA to cover that. And, we all know that as technical developments occur digitally and technology develops, some of the gaming aspects were not foreseen back in 1988. So it's a clarification that we think that is still respects the tribal state relationship in the sense that it's not going to be an imposition on the states. It would still require the Indian people would have to, the states would legalize it. But if this was defined and clarified, then we could do sports gaming and not be left behind like Blockbuster was when Netflix came down the road. So we need to be in a position, we believe, to adapt to the digital economy. We've seen, we want to be proactive in that. So that's how we're looking at this issue, and hopefully it'll help advance its discussion.
I think Jason's got a question for you.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Victor. Well, Chairman Butler, in Connecticut, are you guys, what are you seeing with regards to this issue of working it out with the state, and where the bet is being taken? How are the tribes in Connecticut going to proceed under their legislation?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Ray brings up a great point, and we've gone back and forth with the state on that. And so this, at least in Connecticut, because of the nature of our relationships, the state's indifferent as to where the servers are located. But in a state where there's commercial and tribal gaming, Ray's point is 100% on the mark, right? Where, tribes could be limited to just their physical, their geofence boundaries. And, God forbid, a tribe like mine that only has 1,400 acres, right? You can only gamble on or place bets online within that physical footprint. That would be detrimental to us. And so I think if you look at states like Michigan, where there is mixed commercial and tribal gaming, the tribes are taking different paths. Some are locating the servers off reservation, some are locating it on. But again, it's because of the confusion around IGRA that Ray points to that needs to be clarified, that could make it uniform for all. But again, in Connecticut, different relationship. It's indifferent as to where it's at. We're looking at having it off for various reasons. But preferably, we'd love to have it on reservation entirely, to say that all the bets are taking place on the reservation.
So, Aurene, and looking around the country, Aurene, since you've got here in DC, you've got a 10,000-foot view, and looking at the folks that are with us today, I see folks from New Mexico and other states. And Chairman Stevens is joining us today as well, participating. And in Wisconsin is another state that potentially is going to face this. But in Michigan, they made the decision precisely because of the point Ray brought up. They didn't want to be left behind, and they didn't want to be fighting for customers after MGM and all the big commercial casinos in downtown Detroit sucked up all the customer base in Michigan. So they reached agreement to just go ahead and participate under state law. Certainly not a model we would want to encourage around the country, but also just born out of necessity because they couldn't wait. And Victor and I have had, Michigan representatives on here, tribal leaders, and surprisingly, they're really happy with the way things have rolled out so far. They've got good partners in some of the bigger companies like DraftKings. So what do you think, Aureen? As you look around the country, is there a way that we can do something in DC, amending IGRA, or coming up with maybe an amendment to the Wire Act, or just reforming the Wire Act? What do you see out there, Aureen?
I think the easiest way to deal with it, to allow tribes the most discretion and ability to move forward, would be to look at a bill similar to what Chairman Halbritter's discussing and what they're considering, which would basically clarify for purposes of IGRA that where the bet takes place is where the server is. I mean, that would be the simplest way to do it. It's not inconsistent with the way that they look at things in New Jersey in terms of how they're operating their sports betting. And it would be something that would be able to apply across Indian country, so that when they sit down at the table with the governor, they can say, well, this is on reservation, this is IGRA gaming. If you're doing it outside of the state, or you have the ability to negotiate that, you can just do that. Because piecemealing it, like you said, is you're just really leaving yourself to however your relationships are within that state with your governor and with your legislature. And for a lot of tribes, they're very fortunate to have great relationships, as Mashantucket Pequot does with their state legislators. But there are states where they don't have such great relationships, like Oklahoma, right? And they might never otherwise get there if you don't have kind of an umbrella law that kind of clarifies how these things work. So that's probably the best and easiest way to move forward, but that doesn't mean it's easy, right? We still have to get Indian country on board with that. And there's still a view that it's one step toward full internet, or, that they just really want to protect their brick and mortar facilities. And so I think as a community, we have to have those discussions, but the best way to move forward would be to have something uniform that applied to everybody.
Chairman Halbritter, she brings up a really good point. One of the big concerns that you hear, and we've heard for the last 30 years, has been a real fear of opening up IGRA, because we don't know what's going to happen. Someone like Lindsey Graham could do something nutty or something. So aren't you worried about reopening IGRA, that it might cause more harm than good?
Yes, we are actually. That's a very good point. I think that's a legitimate concern. The issue for us, as we look at this, is one that I think this expansion of sports, mobile sports gaming at this point is going to be a very significant revenue shift from tribes in states where they do legalize it. It is sort of the future, and it's inevitable. This is not an easy choice, but to have a clarification done through Congress, as simple as Aureen was speaking to, it would allow Indian tribes not to have to negotiate with the states. They would be able to provide and offer this to their facilities. But if this mobile sports gaming is offered, it will erode and affect the revenues of the brick and mortar. So we think it's inevitable, and we certainly would not want to jeopardize IGRA. But on the other hand, we're jeopardized by the expansion of sports gaming. And I think there will probably be online gaming as an expansion when the states start seeing the kind of revenues that are available to them. It's sort of like when state lotteries, some states didn't want to do it, but when they saw the revenues being raised, they really could not ignore it.
Right. I think you bring up a very valid point. I know in New Jersey during the pandemic, that was the big story, was the fact that how much online gaming was generating, and when the world of sports betting stopped, I mean, it was still there and people were still being entertained. So I think the fact that this is an issue we can't ignore. It's something that's very important. As Chairman Butler said, they've just spent the last year, probably no, excuse me, a lot longer than that, getting to the point where they are, you know. So, you know, Ray, you know, one, excuse me, Chairman Halbritter, you know, one of the things that, you know, New York's really an interesting place, especially for politics. They were talking about the tribal exclusivity zone. What exactly is this in New York? What does that mean?
What was your question?
The tribal exclusivity zone?
Oh, yes. Part of our agreement with the state when we had our agreements, the Senecas and us, we have a certain amount of counties that the state is not allowed to have any other gaming other than what exists. So there's one point of leverage for both the Senecas and us. I don't know if the Mohawks, I'm sure they might have an exclusivity area, but what that would mean is that if the state did pass mobile sports gaming, they couldn't do it in our exclusivity zones, or at least we could challenge it, given our agreements. So there is a little bit of a leverage point there. I mean, we could do through what other tribes may have done is go to the states and work under the state. But, you know, of course, that isn't an exercise of our sovereignty, and we're hoping to try to do as much as we can to preserve the sovereignty of Indian nations by preserving their ability to decide for themselves what they do, both revenue-wise and in other ways.
Yeah, and this is the state that created that Southern gaming license that went all the way up to the Great Lakes too. So, you know, I'm always amused at New York politics and stuff like that. So, Jason,
Hey, well,
what
Victor,
go ahead.
Victor, you know, and I'll kick it over to Chairman Butler in a second, but one of the things, you know, we shouldn't just point out crazy fish flopping Lindsey Graham, who before he's even out of the water, he's flopping in the air before he hits land. Your Senator Feinstein, has this thing against, you know, taking land into trust and for gaming purposes, what is commonly referred to as off-reservation gaming, but you know, that's just a misnomer. It's the right of a tribe to reclaim their territory and do what they want with it economically. You know, that's a big issue because she's always been trying to amend IGRA to get rid of the ability for tribes to take land into trust for gaming purposes. So that's a big one. And until she's gone, and she's on the Democratic side of the aisle. That's the other big problem with Democrats in control now. But, you know, we can confront those down the line. But for you, Chairman Butler, you know, Connecticut is unique as well. You guys are right there in the mid-Atlantic. What is it? About 40% of the country lives in the mid-Atlantic. You've got the customer base for online gaming. You've got the means, the broadband, the infrastructure. You know, it's not like setting it up in out west and everything with limited broadband capability. How do you see this playing out, Chairman Butler? Because we don't want to also create a have and have not situation. And we've got the infrastructure bill. It looks like Biden's going to try to do the infrastructure bill in 3 pieces. Now might be the perfect time to try to rectify all of this if they're going to throw another $3 trillion into America's infrastructure, because internet broadband is right there. But within Connecticut, how are you guys going to deal with the geofencing and all those types of issues?
Thanks, Jay. Well, I also I appreciate how you point out that Feinstein is Victor's senator and his problem.
I didn't vote for her. I didn't vote for her, man. I didn't vote for her.
We only have 1,600 acres in trust, so we're looking forward to the day that we can take it in more. But no, you're absolutely right, Jason. I mean, that's what was the success behind Foxwoods initially, is we were in that sweet spot from a demographic perspective. You know, 25 million people within a 3 million drive. I mean, it was shooting fish in a barrel, right? And so, you know, with all the competition that has come into play in the Northeast, as Ray is incredibly familiar with, as many of my other tribal leaders in the Northeast are, you know, it's been difficult. We've had to be more creative and rely more on technology. And you're absolutely right. Connecticut has invested in that infrastructure in a way that other states haven't. You know, we're a smaller footprint and have access to large amounts of capital given who our neighbors are. And so we feel like we're in a good spot. And, you know, Connecticut has this awkward shape to it. It's a little postage stamp with a handle on it. It's a small state, so geofencing is fairly easy, and the technology is solid and it's been in play, as we've seen, successfully in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, now Michigan, and a few other states that are doing online bets. And so we know that we'll be able to handle that well enough. And again, look forward to launching in the very near future. And the way that we're looking at it, again, every tribe has to look at it differently based on the state that they're in. And Aureen pointed that out, right? Again, we have the fortune of, I wouldn't say that they're a great relationship. I'm not sure if it's Aureen or Victor that said that. We have a great relationship with our legislature. It's okay. And it's convenient when it is convenient for others, right? And the reality is, and I said this a few weeks ago, I was on a panel with my dear friend, Senator Kathy Austin, who Victor knows and adores. But we were on a panel, it was a two federally recognized tribes and 3 state tribes. And we were talking about the vaccination efforts and how both us and Mohegan have had incredible access to vaccines, yet the state recognized tribes have had little to none. And I said very candidly on that call, if it weren't for us with gaming, the state would be treating us the exact same way they're treating the other state recognized tribes. So, we have to understand that and recognize what those relationships are. Yep, we're all friends, right? But it's a relationship out of necessity. And to Ray's point, if we didn't have IGRA in place, they wouldn't have a necessity to work with us tribes. And we got to be honest with ourselves on that, regardless of how much we think we've come in these relationships. So we understand that we're in a good place from that perspective in Connecticut, that allows us to look at this in a way where we can expand sports betting and iGaming and have comfort that it's going to grow our economy and not the threat of taking it away. There's always the threat that down the line, the state says, hey, wait a minute, there's so much money to be made in internet gaming that, you know what, screw the agreements we have with the tribes, because we're going to make so much money without it. But we think the chances of that are slim, although they exist, because we still have a strong foothold with the size of our facilities and the economies that they generate for the state. You see in New Jersey, pre-COVID, the advent of online gaming, retail gaming actually was growing. And so there's just an ecosystem that's created from a cross-marketing perspective that was sending people who are playing online and sports betting and sending them back to the physical properties with all the amenities and entertainment that we can offer. So that's the way we're looking at it in Connecticut. And again, I know it's unique in every other state, but and you're really going to have to do those analysis on each. But I think the key, though, to Ray's point is if we can set an equal playing field at the federal level, that would be the best approach for all tribes. If we had IGRA that clearly defines sports betting for us and where the servers were placed, this would not have been a 5-year negotiation with the state. It would have been a 6-month negotiation, or we would have just launched on our own and forced them into a negotiation. So,
and plus you had 2 governors too.
Yeah, we over the course of 2 governors.
Yeah, and you had 2 governors. Chairman Halbritter, I have a question for you, but before I go, I was doing my research and I reached out to some of the California tribes, spoke to my tribe and other ones. And so what they're saying in California is that they have gathered more than 1.4 million signatures, which is 400,000 signatures more than that is required. The election officials have until April 22nd to verify the signatures, and the tribal coalition is confident that when the counting is complete, they will have tens of thousands of more signatures than what is necessary for California. So what we're talking in California, that they're looking at a referendum in 2020 for sports betting. So, they're feeling very confident that on April 22nd, they're going to be announced that they have enough signatures. So that starts to put California in place. So Chairman Halbritter, is it mobile kind of counterintuitive to what we're doing now?
Well, it's an inevitability. The states are going to want revenues, and they're going to go to mobile sports betting and possibly online gaming generally. And so we just don't want us to be left behind. The way, if you have a clarification, it doesn't mean tribes have to do it. It means they do have the option. They don't have to go to the states and under their laws. They can exercise their tribal sovereignty to expand their gaming to not be left behind with mobile sports betting and potentially other gaming, online gaming as well. So it preserves our sovereignty, and it does allow us to access those revenues because it's an inevitability. Here it is in New York State, like Chairman Butler says, each situation is a little different. So you do have to take that into consideration, but this is how we see it happening here. It would be, the clarification would apply only to those states where tribes desire it and where it's expanded by the state.
You know, I have a question from Jill Dorson from Sports Handle. She wants to know, what's the likelihood that Oneida Nation will offer mobile sports betting by next year's Super Bowl?
Well, how soon can we get this technical clarification through? I think there is an option for every tribe to go through the regular state channels, you might say, but it's not in a sense like a tribal initiative. It's more like just another entity that functions under state law. Our preference is to ideally keep our sovereignty, keep our own ability to do and expand gaming like the state does as an equal, not as a under their laws. So I think it's very possible, but our preferred goal is to have us be able to offer it with a clarification through the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act.
And
Chairman
Victor,
Halbritter.
I would point out too, I mean, leaders like myself and Ray are also in situations where we're paying excessively high revenue shares, right? And so when you look at what Ray's paying in New York, what I'm paying in Connecticut versus what the Michigan tribes are paying, I said this to my governor. I said, look, I'd love to pay 2% of my slot revenue to you in exchange for, a 30% tax rate on iGaming. And so, there's so many factors that go into the calculus that tribal leaders have to make. And I was exactly where Ray was at, but with the difference of being that there was just 2 tribes in the state, and the state was only working with us without commercial gamers. So, I mean, just even the tax rate of what you're getting on your commercial, on your tribal facilities drives that decision. I mean, if he's paying 25%, well, why would I want additional competition that's paying a lower tax rate in internet gaming or internet sports when I'm paying this amount? So something's got to give.
And to keep in mind that if this is offered, if a tribe does it under the state, they would be paying some sort of fee to the state, a tax. And if we get the clarification, they will not have to pay that to the state.
And Chairman Halbritter, and I see our friends from Mississippi Choctaw are on the line today as well. They're doing, mobile gaming just on the reservation and on their properties. Does Oneida have anything like that set up already?
No, we're not doing that on our properties or land.
Okay.
No, not at the moment.
Okay. I only asked that because, to point out, some of these tribes have already moved forward with exactly what Chairman Butler was describing. And it comes down to each tribe's unique circumstance and their agreement with the state. You mentioned Michigan. The other good thing about Michigan is their compacts are in perpetuity. So they have no incentive really to open them up and try to negotiate a low margin game like sports.
You're talking Minnesota, right? You're talking Minnesota.
No, Michigan.
Oh, Michigan. Okay.
Yeah, Michigan. And so again, you made a good point there, Chairman Butler, that each of these agreements, and then obviously in Mississippi, they don't, they're self-regulating. They don't have the NIGC issues to necessarily worry about, and also they don't need a compact with the state of Mississippi because they have full gaming down there. So each state is really, you got to look at the particulars of each state, and if there's a way we can smooth this out and make it easier for tribes that aren't in those unique situations to assert their sovereignty and assert their tribal government regulatory authority. I think that's what NIGA's always been there for, and it's what we exist for. So we've got to figure out a way to smooth that out this year. And Victor, I noticed one of the questions was about sort of a regulatory framework around all this. They asked if NIGA is requiring these sports betting folks to submit audit reports, and how do we know they're not doing things such as middling or all these things that your local on the corner bookie might be doing. The truth of the matter is, that's not NIGA's responsibility. That should be the NIGC's. They have not taken any really hard stances on any of this. We're trying to push them down the line. But again, tribal regulatory authority is where all that lies. And that's up to the Chairman Butler, Chairman Halbritter, and we have one of the best regulatory systems in America right now. Our tribal regulators are top notch, and we're seeing so much crossover from commercial and tribal now that our systems are there. We just need that little bit of clarification. And Aureen, I always bring us back to the Wire Act. What do you think as Congress moves down the line this year, is there a possibility for doing something, not only with regards to Wire Act, but also Bank Secrecy Act? I even think we should be pushing the Treasury to get rid of the slot reporting minimums, or at least elevating those to something that's reflective of 2021. Because stopping a machine every time someone wins a $1,200 jackpot, that's just ridiculous. So what do you think, Aureen?
I think we're in a pretty tough environment for that. I mean, we've talked about this, how many times that it's absolutely necessary to update all these laws for the time period we're in. And they just don't work for, the technology that's been developed and where we are as a country and as an industry. But it's going to be really hard. I mean, we're concentrating right now on all of these COVID relief bills. There's going to be an infrastructure bill coming up, and it's really going to, concentrate a lot on economic development. And you would think this would fit in economic development, but the jurisdiction and the committees involved that would have to sign off on it, the involvement of probably the Department of Justice, just makes it a really, really tough thing to do. So I think in the short term, it's probably going to be pretty difficult. I would probably think that something like this would, you would have to look at least a year out before you would even get off the ground with getting hearings and getting all of the stakeholders on board and talking together. And that's just an unfortunate situation that we're in now with COVID and how it's taken over everything legislatively. And that's not even talking about, the partisan rancor that's out there and folks not working together. So it's going to be a heavy lift. But it's necessary. I mean, it's time to start looking at those things, not just for gaming, but for, other industries out there.
Yeah, and Aureen, it does feel like the time is right. And Chairman Halbritter, I really do appreciate the fact that you're bringing this back up, because it does feel that, we're starting to chafe against our restrictions, you know what I mean? And the industry is moving forward. And that's kind of part of what this conversation today was about, was just that this speed of this thing is really picking up. And there's a real possibility that we're going to be left behind if we don't make some changes. Aureen, real quick, does the new administration, the changing of the guard and having Secretary Holland in her position now, does that make any difference?
I think it does make a huge difference. Secretary Holland is going to be, I think she's going to be fantastic moving forward. It's really great to have someone in that position who understands our issues and who we don't have to spend a lot of time educating about what we're about and why we need different things to be considered by her. But I think the bigger thing is that, we have new people at the Department of Justice, and that's been such just like big brick wall for us for so long now that with the new people that are there, I'm really hopeful that we have a better audience in terms of our issues and more sympathy in looking at what our needs are. I spoke a little bit about earlier about how having the server being on Indian land and having the bet considered there is similar to what they have in New Jersey. And the Department of Justice was fine with that interpretation, but when it comes to Indians, they're not fine with that interpretation, and that doesn't make any sense. So I'm hoping that with this new Department of Justice, new administration, that when we go and talk to the political people there, that they'll be a lot more understanding, and that only makes sense anyway, but they'll be more understanding on those kinds of issues.
Chairman Halbritter, same question to you.
Well, I think you want to be very selective about how you approach any kind of change with any administration. And that's why we thought about this, and this would be probably as small, if you will, an initiation to change something or to clarify something as we could. I think we certainly have an administration that is going to be much more receptive to our communicative. It's going to be receptive. We'll be able to talk to them. But they're also going to be bound by the history of what has taken place, the Wire Act interpretations by Justice previously, their memos. They just can't initiate some change in the way they interpret how those wagers and where they are. It just is going to need a clarification if we, as tribes who desire it, want to participate in it. But there's certainly a good reason to believe that we're going to have a completely different relationship with the entire group changing. I mean, the past was simply a nightmare. And, but I think you do have to be very careful not to try to expect too much and take on too much.
Yeah. Well, I like to remind everyone about the Treaty of Fort Laramie, that the tribes in South Dakota were promised the Black Hills in perpetuity until they found gold in them, so I think that's always something that sticks into my mind, that, no matter what we do, we always have to be careful and to protect what we have and what we're going to have in the future. So I think sports betting is very important that we make sure that we're at the forefront of this and that we're not left behind. So, I'm optimistic, but, I think we've all been into this dance before, and we know how difficult it is. And especially with this administration, we have a very welcoming administration now as opposed to the last one, but still, the problems and the roadblocks are still there. Jason, what do we think, brother? What do we think?
I mean, the panel points out, this is a very diverse issue, again, from state to state, and we're going to work as hard as we can on the federal level to help advance, the predicament that Chairman Halbritter finds themselves in. I will ask Chairman Halbritter, within your state of New York, what do you, I mean, Governor Cuomo's in a lot of trouble right now. What do you think, is that going to impact where you guys are trying to go and where the New York State Legislature is trying to go with online sports betting and gaming?
I don't think it will. It'll just change the players, but not the game.
Right.
Whatever happens to Governor Cuomo, there'll be somebody else, but the state is still going to be facing a desire to want to increase their revenues. They're under the pandemic. They're looking for money wherever and wherever they can get it. This is definitely a source of revenue for them through the commercial casinos. So we know it's an inevitability here. So that's why as you say, we're trying to be ahead of it as much as we can. I think you'll see passage or enacting the opportunity for the state to offer mobile sports betting happening here very shortly.
Mm-hmm. And Victor, so, what you laid out in California and where New York is right now, that's almost a third of the country, just those two states. So California and New York can easily, survive on their own with just their own in-state customer base. So I think it's important if we can smooth out some of these laws. I really think at some point that Wire Act has got to go, but there's no reason that tribes at some point shouldn't be able to sign agreements like the states do with Powerball and Mega Millions, and tribes start pooling resources and pooling pots of money for their customer base. It's no different. And I think that's where this will ultimately lead. It also will diversify the risk. If there's some huge upset somewhere, if the Vegas Knights in their first year almost win the Stanley Cup, you're not going to bankrupt a brand new sports book or even an existing sports book. So those things have got to be played out. And again, we're going to be at National Indian Gaming Association. This is going to be priority number one. I'm hoping, as Aureen said, we can wrap this into some of the infrastructure stuff, because as she said, the partisan rancor, as real as it might have felt in the past, it's worse now. And how is it worse? If you're a Republican that voted not to certify the Electoral College, Democrats do not want to be on an agenda with Republicans who did that. And so it makes it hard to get them in the same room now. And they are asking specifically, like, who's attending your legislative summit? Who's going to be there? And if they find out it's somebody who voted against the election or was involved in the January 6th Capitol riot, they are not playing around this time. It's a wall. There is no communication whatsoever. And you're seeing it play out just in the halls of Congress when Congress members are facing each other. Their offices are opposite sides and shenanigans are going on. So it's really bad right now, but I'm hoping we can break through that. Democrats do have the majority. There's always a possibility that they may just throw out the filibuster if they ultimately can't get anything going. And Indian country's got to be ready to ride those coattails, because there's a lot in Indian country that's got to be addressed infrastructure wise. So that's kind of where we're at, and we're open to all ideas and suggestions. We're going to try to pull off a trade show in July where this would be a really big topic. So we're hopeful, and let's see how the next couple of weeks play out before the summer legislative session begins.
You know, and I think it's important, Jason, you know, if you look at what just happened in South Dakota with some of that legislation, you know, the tribes, you know, they wanted to do mobile and they're going, no, the tribes in South Dakota can't do it. You're only going to do retail. You know, if you're going to do mobile, it's going to be only in Deadwood. And so, you know, the tribes in South Dakota are left in the cold again. You know what I mean? So I think that's why what Chairman Halbritter is talking about is really important. But as we know, you know, the dysfunction in Congress is real. And, you know, that's kind of hard, even with great ideas, are not even getting the oxygen that they need. So, you know, we still have our work cut out for us. But, you know, the thing is that we're Native Americans. We're going to be here for a long time. We're not going anywhere. You know, seven generations, baby, you know. Right. Does anybody have any of our audience any more questions, Aureen? And Chairman Halbritter, again, thank you so much. Do you have anything you'd like to tell our audience, which is, you know, a good part of the industry and stuff like that? A lot of people are listening, a lot of press is listening, a lot of tribes are listening.
Well, just thank you for the opportunity to speak to these issues. They certainly affect us all. They're happening right now as we speak. There's no time to waste, but we really are delighted. It's good to see you, Chairman Butler, our buddy over there. And we get to see each other at least once a year, maybe. And but we wish everyone well, and we know everyone's situation is a little different, but we certainly are delighted to have the opportunity to speak to everyone. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak on the panel, and we appreciate that. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, sir. And you know, I think if anything we've learned today is that there is a real commonality about this, and we all share, I think, the same opinion to try to get there. And we both understand as technology changes that, you know, legislation has to change so that we can adapt and survive too. Chairman Butler, before we go, have you got anything to say to our wonderful audience?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate Ray's point about the Chairman Halbritter. I know we're too collegial, so
yeah, I know I do that too, man.
Respectfully. But just his point about the optimism that we should have, but be cautious, right? I mean, we had an administration 5 years ago that we thought was the greatest for Indian country, right? And some of the issues that we brought up earlier in this call were issues that were brought up 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago and still weren't resolved. I mean, in the case of Mashantucket, we had 16 acres going into the Obama administration. I mean, 1,600 acres going into the Obama administration. We had 1,600 coming out of it. So, you know, we should all be excited and be ready to jump on the tailwinds of this new administration and the new approach they're taking. And I mean, Deb is a dear friend to myself personally and all of Indian country, so we should be excited about that. But certainly stay diligent and don't take anything for granted and work hard, and good things will come. And I say that as I look at Ray, and I don't know that everyone on this call understands, you know, truly the history of Ray and the pioneer that he is, that really laid the foundation for all of us in Indian gaming. He was in that core group of tribal leaders, you know, along with the Skip Haywards from Pequot and others that really fought for the successes that we have today in what we call this Indian gaming economy. And so, Ray, to you, always tremendous respect and appreciation for what you've done for all of us for generations. So, katapo to you, Mo.
That's true. Credit where credit's due. Aureen, tell us why we should be excited by this new administration before we go.
Well, I'm usually the Debbie Downer in any group, so you know, just hold on. It's not all, you know, unicorns and puppies, but I do think we have, you know, a lot to look forward to. Yes, it's work and it takes a long time under any administration, but just, and as you all know, I work in the Republican space, but just not having to go in and start from square one every single time I go into a meeting, it's just going to be such a relief, because we're going to save, you know, that much more time and have the ability, hopefully, to do more than we've been able to do in the last few years. And I really appreciate the ability to do that. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm the unicorns and puppies person on this panel.
Oh, come on, Aureen. Look, we have no Zinke and no bar. That's a huge step up right there. So
yeah, no kidding. It's a heck coming along. Well, you know what? I'd like to thank my guests, Chairman Halbritter from the Oneida Nation, Chairman Rodney Butler from the great Mashantucket Pequots, and our dear friend Aureen Martin from Washington, D.C. We'd like to thank everyone. I think this was a really good and informative program. I want you guys to stay tuned. We're going to be trying to get Secretary Holland soon. We're still out there working on it, but I think she'll have some really important things to talk about in tribal gaming too. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, listeners. We'll see you guys next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Chairman Halbritter.